So welcome to the Presentations 101 webinar. The purpose of this webinar is to give you inspiration and tools to get presenting, especially in the context of 24 hours of reality, which we'll talk to you about very shortly. Some of you haven't ever given a presentation yet. Some of you are seasoned speakers. Some of you have been taking a little bit of a break and want to get back into it. So whatever your case is, thank you for being here, and I hope that you'll get a few tips and tricks from us today. So here is quickly the organization of today's webinar. We're going to talk to you about 24 hours of reality, how to secure presentation requests, how to claim requests that are existing, preparing for the big day, giving the presentation, getting youth engaged, reporting back to us, doing more through climate hubs, and then we'll finish off with a Q&A period. At any point in time during the webinar, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them in the Q&A window. We'll be sure to address your questions at the end of the webinar. So I'm going to quickly present our panelists today, starting with Judy. She's our lead mentor for BC, and she actually attended 7 trainings as a mentor. She's the founding creator of Yes BC, which is a grassroots environmental organization that empowers youth to lead us all to a sustainable future. And among all of her many expertises, Judy is particularly passionate about providing leadership opportunity for youth and creating platforms for them to have their voices heard on issues that matter most to them. Also joining us is Grant Linney. So Grant is located in the Toronto area, and he's helped as a lead mentor in 3 leadership core trainings, and he is an environmental educator, actually outdoor environmental educator, who is very, very actively retired. In fact, he's given a record-breaking amount of presentations, so he's particularly qualified to talk to us today about giving presentations. He is soon going to be celebrating his 500th climate reality presentation, so he knows what he's talking about. And me, I'm Emily. I'm a branch staff here at Climate Reality based in Montreal, and I'm the lead mentor for this area as well. And my job is to make sure climate leaders are supported and have the opportunities and tools necessary to perform impactful and plentiful acts of leadership. So I'm going to give the floor to Grant at this point, and he's going to present 24 hours of reality.
Hi, everybody. 24 Hours of Reality, you've known in the past as an Al Gore feature event with him bringing in guests from all over the globe and the show kind of traveling around. It's going to travel around in a different way this time. We're going to utilize as many of our climate reality leaders, and I think there's about 20,000 of them worldwide. We'd like to get as many of them delivering their own presentations in different parts of the world. So that's the big difference. That's the new format. We want you to put your personal imprint on this and make people aware that this is part of a special event. I think that's all I need to say at this point.
Thank you, Grant. In terms of securing presentation requests, we do ask you to do a little bit of outreach on your own, and some tips for doing outreach is we recommend reaching out to local schools and businesses, churches, homes for the elderly, library, community groups, etc., to offer your services as a speaker. Climate Reality is a well-known name, but Al Gore is an even better known name. So if you say that you've been personally trained by Al Gore to speak about climate change, that will really attract people and get them, to want to invite you into their business or their school or their classroom to speak. If you work in an office, organizing a lunch and learn is a really nice idea as well, because it gets your colleagues on board, and it also doesn't require much of a time commitment for them, and it can really spark some interesting conversations at the office. If you have a child or a niece, a nephew, you know, a young front door neighbor, you can always ask them to ask their teacher if you can come into their classroom. And as mentioned, classrooms are really a good place to give presentations. Most of our climate leaders actually succeed in giving presentations in classrooms more than any other context. In particular, elementary school and high school teachers are really into having guest speakers come in. So that's really usually a low-hanging fruit for us, and it's very efficient and it's very impactful too, and there's such great crowds. So I strongly recommend reaching out to classes, schools as your first go-to. For this, the Reality Hub is actually your best friend. And I will show you a little bit how to navigate the Reality Hub to make the best use of it. So in your Reality Hub profile, you will see participate as a tab option. And in this, you will be able to host a presentation. And if you click here, this is where you can actually input the details of a presentation that you are organizing. If you are reaching out to strangers to have them request a presentation, we do ask that you send them to the Reality Hub and have them enter their presentation request in the Reality Hub. There are several reasons for this, but one major one is that we're building a map with for 24 hours of reality, whereby we'll be able to see who is giving a 24 hours of reality presentation across the world, and it's an interactive map, and it's very encouraging to see how many presentations are going on in your area at the same time. It really highlights the feeling of being part of a big movement. And it also provides us with important data and statistics about what's happening. You can also claim a presentation request in the Reality Hub. By clicking here, you will be able to see a map where you will see current pending presentation requests that have yet to be claimed. And once you claim a presentation, you can then coordinate directly with the organizer of the presentation to hash out the details. You should be signed up for automatic email notifications when a presentation request is made in your area. If you are not signed up for this, you can simply go into your Reality Hub profile in your preferences and make sure you check off the box that says, yes, I want to get notifications. This is a really, really neat feature because it'll automatically notify you when a request is made in your area. And what's nice about it is that if ever the presentation request is not claimed within, I think it's 10 days, the engine will actually automatically send that same notification, but to a wider pool of people. So it'll kind of increase the region where that is being targeted to find a speaker. So the Reality Hub is a really, really great tool, and it's got the potential to be a good helper in getting you out there and presenting. You can also find resources in the Reality Hub. So we've got a really neat resource library in there. And that is actually under the Learn tab. So Learn here, and then the resource library. You can search for slide decks. There are many, many slide decks that have been developed over the time. And also the promotional materials are really neat. There's actually a business card in there that you can personalize with your name and print out. There's also letters that you can send out and personalize. So make sure you go into the Reality Hub and explore these tools that are at your disposition in soliciting presentation requests. And now I will pass it on to Judy, who will talk to us about preparing for the presentation.
Hi, thanks Emily, and hi everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join in this webinar. I'm going to give you just a few ideas around preparing for your presentation, things that I've found helpful. Most importantly, I think from the beginning is to know who your audience is and find out if they have a particular focus or interest in mind. And there's generally someone who's organizing the presentation a contact person, that it's important to certainly have a conversation with them to find out what the audience is most interested in, so you can try and present information and tailor your presentation to those interests. It's also important to visit, if you can, visit your venue ahead of time so you can see the physical layout. You'll know exactly what to expect in terms of where you'll be in relation to the screen and your computer, and being able to manage the presentation as you're giving it. It's also important to give the person who's organizing the presentation to give them information about you, enough information so they're able to appropriately make an introduction, tell them a little bit about who you are. And I guess one of the first things that you would need to think about in considering in preparation for your presentation is how long you want it to be. And Al Gore stands and delivers a presentation, 60 minutes, maybe sometimes longer. I think I've found over the years in my experience that shortened presentation is, most of my audiences are youth, so that's got something to do with it, but a shortened presentation, and then allowing for plenty of time for questions and discussion to follow. So one of the things that I find useful is the Truth in 10 slide deck. 50, 60 slides in there to deliver the message succinctly and effectively, not necessarily having to use all those 55 slides, but maybe including some of your own that perhaps address issues that are specific to the region or the area that you're in. Yeah, so adding your own slides is an effective way to address local concerns. So in terms of personalizing, I like to let people know what it is that brought me to climate reality to begin with, and let them know a bit about the Climate Reality Project and how trainings are held in various locations throughout the year, and give people, refer them to the website so they can find out when the next training's coming, and maybe they'd like to have an opportunity to participate in that training themselves. I like to throw a few slides in of past trainings that I've attended. One that was particularly notable was in Nashville and the Wild Horse Saloon, which made some really interesting visuals and photos around that. But we're pretty excited about what we do as volunteers in this organization. It's kind of nice to share that enthusiasm and let people know what it's like to have that training experience. So a brief bit of background about yourself. Some of that can be covered by the person that introduces you, but it's really nice to give some personal touch to what you're presenting. And also, I think this is going to come later in the webinar, but also to let people know about local climate reality activities in your area, and the climate hubs that you don't need to be a trained climate reality leader to participate in those hubs. So yeah, those are just a few tips for getting ready for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judy. And I really like your point about storytelling. It's something that comes up a lot, is making it personal and explaining to people why you got into this. It's really inspiring. I would add a little logistic, boring point. If and when you download your resources from the Reality Hub and you want to personalize a slideshow, we do recommend that you modify the slides directly in the existing file. We found that videos and animations become problematic when people copy-paste those slides into a new slideshow. So that's one little tip that I would like to add. And also bear in mind, everyone, that my job is I'm there to help you. So if ever you have any questions about navigating the Reality Hub, you're having trouble logging in, you're feeling maybe a little bit overwhelmed about all the resources in there, I'm here for you. You can drop me a quick email Also, if there's something that you're not finding, like a resource that you need on a specific topic, we internally have a few slideshows that have yet to be shared to the grand public, and so maybe, you know, it's likely that I have something on hand that could be useful for you. So don't hesitate to reach out to me. Sorry, I'll be more than happy to assist you. And now I'm going to pass it on to Grant, who will give us his expert advice on giving the presentation.
Gee, I didn't know you had videos up your sleeve, Emily. I'm going to have to get in touch with you about this. Gee whiz.
They're mostly slides.
There you go.
More slides than videos, but.
Right. Okay, so first slide shows me at the Minneapolis training. And one of the things I really recommend that you do before a presentation is rehearse it. Make sure you got your, as Judy says, you negotiate your time with your host, how much time you're going to have. And you want to make sure you stay within that time limit. I think that's very important and respectful. And also in rehearsing it, you might end up saying, gee, I had to rush through that section. I want a little bit more emphasis there. I'm going to trim somewhere else. So it's worth that investment to do that. Next slide. I am big on videos, and I keep an eye out for videos through various newsletters and YouTube that I think can be appropriate, and I'm constantly switching them over. I often use 6-8 videos in a presentation. I'm familiar enough with my Mac and with iMovie that I can edit them and shorten them if I need to. That's a good skill to have. If you have that, you can put that to good use. Next slide. I do 3 parts to my presentation, and number 1, called the crisis, actually I often call it climate emergency. And I explain the word emergency, that word has 2 components to it. Number 1, it means we've got to act. If, as Greta Thunberg says, our house is on fire, it isn't time to talk, it's time to act. And number 2 component of an emergency is the time frame, that the action happen now. Related to part 1, I often show an inconvenient sequel as my first video. Not the entire film, just the trailer. And I will, if I'm with a school audience, give them 2 things to look for as that video is being shown. Number 1, what's the problem? And don't tell me it's pollution or that it's Donald Trump. What is the problem? And number 2, what's the solution? So let's watch that.
Yep, it's coming up.
Speaking of global warming, where is we need some global warming? Freezing.
Haven't got volume, Emily.
Sorry?
Don't have volume.
Oh.
No sound.
That's odd. You're supposed to. Is anyone else having that issue?
Judy, can you hear this now?
I could hear it faintly. Now I can't hear the audio at all.
I've paused it. I don't know why it's not. I think we'll have to keep it rolling with the sound down. I'm sorry. I'll have to troubleshoot another time.
Okay. So Mr. Gore is just explaining how in his original film, his prediction about what would happen to the World Trade Center if a Hurricane Sandy type storm hit was ridiculous. And then of course it did happen. This is showing a rain bomb, and there goes the bomb, extreme weather related to climate change. And then he's up in the Arctic and he's noticing ice loss, and now he's going to solutions, solar, wind. It's amazing how much ground he covers in 2 minutes of a pilot, of a trailer, sorry, talking about the Paris climate meeting and the success of that in terms of getting everybody on board to make some commitments, firm commitments. And then back to Donald Trump saying he's going to dismantle the EPA and not spend money on climate change. And then basically Mr. Gore saying, good heavens, this is clear, obvious, we've got to respond to the climate emergency, what he calls the climate crisis. And he talks about the importance of making your voice heard, like what happens in any mass movement for good. We've got to speak up. We've got to get out on the streets. We've got to demand that the politicians make the changes that are necessary. Okay.
Sorry about the sound, everyone. Don't know what happened.
Well, hopefully we'll get it back with 7.
Hopefully. Shall we launch 7 right away?
7 is as the name suggests, it's about 7-year-olds talking about growing up. And it starts in a very cute and 7-year-old way, and then it starts to get a little bit more serious, and it actually carries a pretty powerful whop with it.
Great. I'm going to share that now. All right. Let's hope the sound is higher on this one.
Very, very slight volume. Hardly, but you're getting a script underneath, so you get an idea of what they're saying.
When I'm old, like 59, there might not even be a world I can live in. I don't know what I'm saying. Because Mummy and Daddy don't want to. Yeah, but you know what I'm saying. You're a grown up, so please act so I can be one too. It's not too late. But you have to do something now. Because I'm 7.
So there's a nice turning of the tables there in terms of saying, look, you grown-ups, you need to do something, and you need to do it now because it's an emergency. Okay, part 2. And maybe we'll just skip the video related to this one.
Sure.
Part 2 is the science. And there is a great video clip. I'm hoping Émilie will be able to send out the links so that you have these. They're all on YouTube. This is Neil deGrasse talking about science as the best way we have of understanding the world around us. And he talks about scientific method and trial and error and conducting experiments and then coming to emergent truths. And when something reaches the status of emergent truth, like E equals MC squared, you can't disagree with it. You can't say, well, I don't believe in that. You don't have that option, as he puts it. He goes on to say climate change is an emergent truth. And what we need to do is, first things first, is accept the science, accept that science tells us we have a problem. And then, and this is really neat coming from a scientist, and then we go to the politics. In order to solve the problem, we have to turn to the political sphere. And one of the things that Al Gore used to say, he doesn't say it anymore, which I find interesting. He actually said it's more important to change laws than light bulbs. And I recently, with my mentee group, I had a meeting and they pushed back a little bit and said, well, it's true we have to change laws. Laws are system change. but we also need to walk our talk and have personal change too. And so light bulbs and energy conservation in your home and what you eat and all those personal things are important also. I really put a lot of emphasis on laws and speaking up. Okay, next. I also use, I love to use, and this is probably because formally I'm officially certified as an English teacher, even though I taught in the outdoors. And I love to use metaphor and analogy to explain the basics of climate change and global warming. So the first thing I'll talk about in one of Al Gore's classic slides is the natural greenhouse effect and how there are natural greenhouse gases that are responsible for life on Earth, basically. If we didn't have those greenhouse gases retaining some of the heat from the sun, there would be no life. The problem is that humans are making this blanket of greenhouse gases thicker. And when you put on a thicker blanket, global warming. And of course, he has slides that demonstrate all the different sources of additional carbon dioxide going up into the atmosphere, mainly from the burning of fossil fuels, but also from the cutting down of trees on a mass scale. So the blanket metaphor I find very useful. The other one is when you're talking small changes in temperature, like 0.8 degrees Celsius is how much we've warmed, and scientists originally thought 2 degrees was the maximum that we could warm up, and now they've revised it to 1.5. It sounds, the numbers sound so small, it almost sounds like we're quibbling. And what I'll say, particularly to students, is, okay, if I tell you that tomorrow is going to be 2 degrees warmer than today, would you notice that? And they pause, and then they usually say, no, I don't think I would. And then I ask the next question, if your internal body temperature was 2 degrees warmer tomorrow than today, would you notice that? And they acknowledge that, yeah, that's a fever. And if they were going to something like a soccer practice with a 2-degree fever, they probably wouldn't do very well. They wouldn't have stamina, their reflexes would be off. It affects the operating systems of their body, just like global warming affects the operating systems of the planet. So to quote Calvin in the comic strip that Émilie found, it's more than a dust speck to talk about 1.5 degrees or 0.8 or 2. It is very significant. And we need people to understand that by thinking internally instead of externally. And I think that might be it for me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Grant. And
okay.
You know, Calvin and Hobbes have such a special place in my heart that I always put in a comic strip whenever I can.
I did a screenshot of that one. I love it.
It's good, right?
Yeah.
I will now pass it on to Judy, who will be talking about youth engagement.
Well, thank you. So what I thought I would do is just sort of run you through a real-time example of preparing for a presentation for youth. And this one is for the 24 hours of reality. Contacted one of our local high schools here and arranged to go and give a climate reality presentation. So what I did to prepare is I've gone into the school and seen a couple of different classes, one environment club and one Climate Science 11 class, and talked to them about the presentation and tried to get input and find out from them what would be most meaningful, what they'd like to hear about, what are the issues that matter to them, and also about the format, you know, how they would like to see the presentation given. And in this case, what the students were interested in was not a lengthy presentation, a shortened one, allowing for time for a panel to follow. And so I asked them for their suggestions on who they would like to come and sit on the panel. And of course, Greta was the first person they suggested, but also looking a little more locally, we've got some amazing young people that are local climate strike organizers here, and they are known to, you know, many of the youth in the region. So a suggestion was made that we call one of the lead organizers in to sit on the panel, because of course it's important, we're presenting to youth, that we have youth representation there. So they also asked if Andrew Weaver could come, and because I work with him, I've had an opportunity to ask him if he could come. He loves presenting to youth, and so he's not going to give the presentation, but he'll be there to field questions and talk about the importance of intergenerational equity. So couple other things about the presentation that was so important about getting there in advance to allow the youth to become involved in organizing it and setting it up, so it's most valuable for them. So they're arranging for the venue, for promotion, to notify the media, and they're actually doing a lot of work, which is awesome. Takes the pressure off and having to do some of this legwork beforehand, and it also means it becomes like their event, and so you know, something of value to them. And another approach we're going to take in this case is co-presenting. So one of my mentees here is just newly trained in Minneapolis. He's a communications professional, so he's going to give his first presentation co-presenting with me. And what we're going to offer the students, if they wish to have a follow-up, is to, if they're interested, because we'll be able to share with them the Truth in 10 slide deck, that if they're interested in giving presentations or informing their family or others that they're involved with, that we would offer to come back and give them some presentation tips and communications tips, and how to use the materials. So yeah, so that's basically the approach being taken for the 24 Hours of Reality, for a local event here focused on youth. We hope to have about 300 or 400 attending out of, I think, about 1,000 students in this school population there. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Judy. And I think I would add that including something about Greta, especially, you know, in recent context, is particularly inspiring, because Greta, you know, she's a young person, and she really showed the world that one person can make a difference. So there's a link to Greta's speech. I won't open it for now because I think you've all probably seen it. But I think her speech that she gave at the UN is particularly, it's a good one to include in your slideshow if you feel like it, and if you're speaking to youth in particular. I will move on to reporting back to us. So at your training, you've probably heard about acts of leadership. Acts of leadership are any actions that you do that, you know, move climate solutions forward. During 24 Hours of Reality, those acts of leadership will mainly be presentations, but at all times, we ask that you report your activities back to us, and we are very grateful when you do so. That information helps us stay, you know, up to date regarding climate leaders' activities, and they also enable us to improve our programs and cater to your needs. And also, in a very significant matter, help us report back to current and potential grant makers. So, you know, it helps us measure our impact and really demonstrate the impact that we're having across Canada. So your acts of leadership can be logged in the Reality Hub. And again, we very much appreciate when you do that. And as a special bonus, for 24 Hours of Reality, there's actually been a partnership that's been negotiated with One Tree Planted, whereby one tree will be planted for every person in your audience. So that's a really nice incentive to get people, you know, attending your presentation, and it's also a really good incentive for you to give a presentation and to report it back to us, you know, in the context of 24 Hours of Reality, because you will definitely have a concrete and real impact in terms of decarbonizing the world. So thank you for taking the time. We've mentioned that it's important to have your audience go away from your presentation feeling not only inspired, but also empowered, and send them away with concrete ideas of what they can do in a real manner is so important. And we do have a selection of slides that focus on individual everyday actions that people can undertake. And if you'd like me to send them to you, I can. They have yet to be shared on the Reality Hub because they still need to be perfected in terms of respecting the presentation standards of the organization. So I can share them on a one-on-one basis. Eventually they will be shared in a greater sense on the Reality Hub, but for now, reach out to me if you'd like to have them. But one thing that we do like to include in our climate reality presentations is the Climate Hub pitch at the end of a presentation, because you've probably heard of climate hubs, but I'll give you a very quick synopsis. Basically, it's a program led by Climate Reality Project Canada, whereby groups of citizens are formed and mobilized and empowered to advance climate solutions locally and also to decarbonize their municipalities. And community climate hubs are open to climate leaders and everyday all citizens from all backgrounds. So you don't need to be a climate leader in order to participate. And this is really a nice avenue for people to get involved. And when there is no existing hub in a city, people can start one, and we have toolkits for that. So it's really something concrete that people can get involved with. So I will move on. I will move on at this point to question period. So I will stop sharing this and see if any questions were asked in the Q&A box. No questions, maybe in the chat, no questions either. Now would be the time if you have any questions that you'd like to send us. I'll give you a few seconds to type those up and send them our way. Otherwise, maybe it just means that we were super clear.
We were a bit shortened by not using the couple of the videos, right? So
that's true, yeah.
But that's okay. You're going to be able to provide those links.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I will be sharing the recording of this webinar for everybody who was registered, because some people register but were not able to join us per se. So they will receive the recording, and by the same token, I will send the links to the wonderful videos that you guys came up with. Oh, there is one question that appeared. Need that form for the tree plant? Yeah, so the tree planting partnership the tree planting is automatic, so you don't need to do anything as long as you log your 24 hours of reality presentation in the Reality Hub. And in that online form, it'll ask you how many people are attending. And of course, we understand it's an estimate, but that's the way to do it. Thank you, Aki, for your question. How do you balance naive optimism with the reality of the situation? That's a good one. Judy or Grant, would you like to take a stab at this question?
Well, I'll start off, and then maybe Grant can add a few points. So I think, you know, especially in relation to speaking to young people, we can't sugarcoat what's happening. It's important that the accurate information be given. I think it's important to let people know what the reality is, but not to overemphasize it, such as in the main slide deck. There's a tremendous amount of slides of extreme weather events, and I tend to think that an example of, you know, several different types of them is fine, but it's one of the things that we don't want to get people in a situation where they're feeling paralyzed rather than empowered. It's a balance, because you do need to present the accurate information, but to be able to give people real suggestions of what they can do, what kind of action they can take, how to get involved with local actions and other related types of groups. Those are just a few things that come to mind.
I would decline using the term naive optimism, and I would use instead determined optimism. I totally agree with Judy that you need to lay out the cards and you need to show the grimness of the situation, and then you need to talk about what we need to do about it. And the single most important thing, according to Kathleen Hayhoe, or Catherine, I guess, Hayhoe, who's a Canadian climate scientist in the United States, highly respected, is to make it part of our conversations. And I really encourage youth to talk to their parents about this and other adults in their lives. There's more and more research showing that those conversations can change parents' mind. They don't normally expect sons and daughters to raise this sort of thing, and when they do, it catches their attention. The rest of us need to speak up too, and particularly to politicians, and get them to realize that we're serious and that this is an issue that must be addressed. And I'm optimistic because we have a minority government, which means there's going to be more than one party that's going to be weighing in on this, and I have some optimism that we may actually make progress because of that.
Thank you, guys. Really good answers. Aki asks, how would you sell the importance of joining a climate hub? I can launch that answer, and Judy and Grant, if you have anything to add, feel free. The reason why we launched the Climate Hub initiative is that Canada was not on the road to achieving its Paris Agreement ambitions. And so we decided that focusing on local and municipal level action was the key to that. We are a very much grassroots-based organization. It's part of our values, and that's why we focus on that level. Municipalities are the ones that invest in the infrastructure that is most likely to have an impact on GHG emissions. I'm thinking, for example, public transit. That's a lot of it is at the municipal level. And so I think having citizens join a hub really sends a loud and clear message to the municipality that this is what is important to the citizens. Also, local governments are closer to their citizens than, say, provincial and federal. They seem kind of out of reach, whereas you can meet your local leaders, your elected officials locally, and really have that one-on-one conversation with them. And we think that that's really where the potential to have a more significant impact lies. Judy and Grant, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Not for me.
All right, thank you. Someone, Tom asks, how do we handle denial, folks? That's a question that comes up quite a bit. What do you guys say?
So, yeah, that's a very good question. And it's one that we all kind of think about, especially as we're heading there. We don't want to be derailed in a presentation by someone who's spouting some of the typical denial lines of reasoning that we hear. And if you haven't heard of Skeptical Science, that can become your friend. That's a great website, a great resource for responding to some of the main lines of that people will present there. As far as someone sort of persisting in your presentation, I would give them an appropriate amount of time to express what they have to say, but not let them take over. It's not theirs, it's yours. And maybe, if there's some point of agreement that could be reached on some basic points, that's awesome. But if you've got someone that's just like totally trying to derail things with you. I think you need to be clear that, okay, we have heard you and I understand, and maybe there'd be some resources that you could provide to them after the event, or ask them how you could reach them to provide them with more detailed information, because sometimes we don't have it right off the top of our heads when we're, you know, trying to cope with a presentation and have somebody that's kind of snarly or behaving not very appropriately. So, you know, I try to give them a little space, and then thank them and say, you know, we don't share the same view, and give them, either direct them towards reliable scientific information, and yeah, I guess that's my basic offering there.
Judy has advanced diplomatic skills, and I admire them. I'm not sure I have as much tact as she does. I show the Neil deGrasse Tyson video clip a lot because I think it addresses denial upfront and in a very forceful way that I can't compare to. This guy's the Einstein of 2019. He's highly respected, and he defends science brilliantly and makes it clear that the case has been made and it's time to move on. And that's my bottom line, is that it's time to move on. We can't afford to spend time debating something that has been settled.
You guys are the best. You know, Judy and Grant together have so much experience giving presentations. I'm actually really enjoying having their wisdom on these questions as well. Thank you for these awesome questions, guys. Anonymous attendee asks, do you believe business and technology are the most effective avenues for change?
I believe politics and citizens urging politicians to make changes is the most effective avenue. I certainly think business has a role to play in this. They have taken some pretty strong positions which are not well known. About 8 years ago, I don't know, 200 major international companies signed a 2-degree challenge communique and basically asked world governments to pass laws that would ensure we would not go above 2 degrees, which now, of course, would be 1.5. That was almost a well-kept secret. It wasn't spread out and disseminated the way it should be, and I don't understand that. What was the second component beyond business that was in that question?
Technology.
Technology? We're going to have to rely on technology. The conventional wisdom now is we're going to have to find the technology to capture the excess carbon that is already in the atmosphere. So we can't rely on technological fixes to allow us to continue burning fossil fuels. I think that's a big mistake. So there's a caution with the use of technology. We've also got to get off fossil fuels.
I very much agree with that, and I'll build on it a little bit. You know, I strongly believe that the key is with the grassroots, is with the people, and I think it's through education that will get people on board, and getting them to make the right political decisions, but also the right consumer decisions. And one example that comes to mind is the historic losses recorded by the dairy industry right now, which is just really a result of, you know, veganism being on the rise. And I think consumer habits have a huge impact on what's out there. You know, it's all about, you know, supply and demand. And I think that by educating citizens, the technology and the business decisions and the political aspect will come naturally. Anything to add on this question, guys?
I think so.
All right.
Like, very good points being made there, though.
Yeah.
From Shelley here.
Yeah, absolutely. Shelley says, we can't buy our way out of this, though. that question sounds very much like a conservative viewpoint of thinking technology will save us. That is not nearly enough. You guys want to respond to that? Oh, you muted, Grant. And, oh, Grant, I'm going to unmute you and you're going to have to start over. I'm sorry.
There, I've unmuted myself. Sorry. Climate Reality Canada is a non-charitable, so we really can't start talking about particular parties. We can say, and I certainly did before the election, vote for the environment. And what that means is do your homework and see which parties are doing the right thing and support them, and get the coalition that a minority government demands to work for climate change.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Now would be the moment. Last call for questions. Wait a few seconds to see if someone's typing. These are really good questions. What a good conversation to have after a webinar. Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up. Grant and Judy, do you have any final comments you'd like to make before?
Just to thank you and thank the folks that have taken the time to be with us, and also that as a mentor, one of the greatest pleasures for me is being able to help people on a one-on-one basis. And I'm the lead mentor for BC, but I certainly don't mind you know, questions coming my way. I'd be happy to have, if Emily wants to share my email address, you know, I'm happy to have conversations or respond to questions or concerns you might have.
And my remarks would be identical to Judy's. I'm happy to share my email, and I enjoy working with climate reality leaders.
Thank you both so much for being here and for taking the time.
Thank you.
Shelley says, I'm so fortunate to have Grant as my lead mentor. He's been instrumental in helping me do my first presentation, so thank you.
That you are.
Hi, Shelley.
That's awesome. And yes, actually, so everybody who's here tonight and whoever registered for the webinar and wasn't able to join us tonight will be receiving a link to the recording. And also, by the same token, I will send out both of your email addresses if anybody ever comes up with a question they'd like to send you after the fact. So thank you both, Judy and Grant, for taking the time. And thank you everyone who took part in this webinar. And I hope you will participate in 24 Hours of Reality. I look forward to reading about your presentations in the Reality Hub. And I wish you a very nice evening.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.